can explain the motivation for my going to Iran in one word. That is Mahmoud. And if I wanted to say two words, I'd say Mahmoud Ahmadi. I had never imagined I would be going to Iran. But it happened because when I was almost 30 years old, I began my graduate studies, a PhD in foreign language and culture education at The Ohio State University. And while I was doing that in the dormitory for graduate students, I just happened to meet this gentleman from Iran. We became friends, and it wasn't long before I realized I loved him.
Hello, everyone. I am Theratai, owner and intercultural trainer at Pro Compass Coaching and Training. Now here at the Crossroads, I will be having a heart-to-heart and one-to-one chats with internationals from all around the world, as well as locals, in how to live, work, and study in the country and beyond. Now, in today's episode, I'm really excited because I'll be having that chat with a speaker, author, and trainer in languages and effective cross-cultural communications. And I cannot wait to hear her story about how she up and left America to live in Iran in pursuit for love. Now, please welcome my guest for today, Dr. Leslie Powell Ahmadi. Hey, Leslie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Right. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay. I was born and raised in the USA. My married name is Leslie Ahmadi, or Leslie Powell Ahmadi, but I was born Leslie Powell of two Black American parents. I had a number of different experiences in growing up. In my very early life, I lived in actually a very multicultural community, and it had an impact, so that while my mother in particular was very good about and nurturing about our Black American heritage, we also were surrounded in our neighborhood by people, Black people, brown people, white people, and it planted in me another consciousness, which is, as a world citizen, it was just a natural thing. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I discovered early on my fascination with hearing different languages, because in our neighborhood there were people speaking different languages. There were, my mother used to play music from all around the world. It was always playing in our household. And in particular, I'll talk about that a little bit later too. But I decided, my first career ambition was to be a flamenco dancer.
Right. I read it on your website. That was like my upcoming question, because you're an author to the book Road Between Two Hearts, A Black American Bride Discovers Iran. And you're telling me about how you grew up. And is this typical of African Americans growing up, that they are surrounded by people of different color and they pursue hobbies like flamenco dancing? Or that? Is this typical? Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say it's typical. I would say it was very specific to my experience. My father lived he worked as a doctor at a hospital, and we lived in a hospital community, so of medical staff. And I think it was actually maybe in the 50s. I'm a child of the 50s, 60s, and 70s when I grew up. And I would say that there was not as often this kind of multicultural experience, more of a
Right.
segregated one, actually.
Right.
But because of this, my father's unique circumstances, and we were impacted, I and my two sisters, and I think um, I think that's why it was important for our mother to nurture us in our own identity.
Right.
I'm also grateful to her for allowing us to see glimpses of the world,
Right.
because she had no idea, and I didn't. But I think there was always something inside me that was responsive to music, number one, and the musicality of language. I think that's what pulled me in. And in particular, there was an artist. I'm going to ask you if you know the name of this singer.
Ooh, who is it?
Because he's from my generation, or my parents' generation, so I'm not sure that you may or may not know the name of Harry Belafonte.
I think so. Yeah, but I have to look him up. But I am aware of the name. But so is he somebody that you look up to musically as you're growing up?
I looked up to him for so many reasons. He was, I'm sorry, unfortunately, he passed away at the
Oh,
age of 96 just this year,
oh,
April 5th. But uh, for me, was a strong Black man,
yes,
sang, who also was a global citizen,
right.
showed respect for traditions from all around the world by singing these songs in such a beautiful.
Yes,
He was a central figure in the civil rights movement, which I grew up in during that period.
that time era.
Yeah.
Yes,
And yet he was, both a person of color and a world citizen, and a person who was conscious of the times. And so his music reached out to me, and I heard all these different languages. In particular, um, the music songs that he sang in Spanish drew my attention. He never did flamenco dancing. I think
ah,
I just the music and the drama and the passion and the musicality. I mean, the sensuality. I mean, as a little girl, as I understood it, it was
right,
just. And so long story short, I chose Spanish as my um, favorite topic in high school
right,
and went on to major in it and go to Spain, go to Mexico, as well as other countries when I had opportunity later in my life. Uh,
right.
and
Yeah,
and so I chose Spanish and language teaching as my career. And then
right.
after I went to Iran, which we'll talk about, uh,
Yeah,
after that, well, I just it 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 became I learned another language, which was Farsi, and
mm,
my whole career, in other words, moved in the direction of cultural and language training.
right. I sense from you, maybe it came from early on in your childhood, a sense of curiosity of other cultures and other languages. And would you say that this was part of your motivations of moving to Iran, or like tell us the story behind you moving to Iran?
Okay, I can explain the motivation for my going to Iran in one word. That is Mahmoud. And if I
Uh-huh.
wanted to say two words, I'd say Mahmoud Ahmadi.
Hmm.
I had never imagined I would be going to Iran, but it happened because when I was almost 30 years old, I began my graduate studies, a PhD in foreign language and culture education at The Ohio State University. And while I was doing that in the dormitory for graduate students, I just happened to meet this gentleman from Iran. We became friends, and it wasn't long before I realized I loved him, but it was not a time that looked promising
Mm-hmm.
for me to go. There were so many things going on in the country.
Right.
There were a lot of tensions between the U.S. and Iran. It was the time shortly after the Iranian Islamic Revolution,
Right.
uh, which is one of the reasons there was tension between our countries. Um, uh, and on top of that, uh, there was this general impression and fear, I think. They often call it Islamophobia. And,
Yes.
you know, people just had these negative perceptions that were sometimes perpetrated on the media. Uh,
Indeed.
and so that that left me in kind of a dilemma, you know.
Right.
But even more significant, I think, is that even though I embraced the idea of living in other countries and other worlds, and even though I believed in, and part of my whole career was to
Right.
teach people to value other cultures and people, to suspend our biases, you
Right.
know, go in with an open mind, to be receptive to the richness that other cultures offer. I was secretly afraid to go to Iran because some
Indeed.
of that not Islamophobia, I don't think it was that. It was more the fear that I couldn't be the flamenco dancer in spirit that I
I
always,
understand. Yeah.
you know, I secretly had that fear in me.
Right.
And because my field was understanding and teaching people about other cultures, I couldn't admit to anybody that I was scared. How could I
Right.
do this? And how could I, as a Black woman, say that or admit that I had some fear about entering into another world, another culture, because I knew what it felt like to have to be judged based
To
on
be the other.
exceptions. Yeah. So this was my deep, dark secret that I didn't tell anyone about.
Yeah.
Totally.
There's something that I really enjoy is that we have a deep commonality that both of us moved for love and to be part of a cross-cultural, cross-faith marriage. And for many of us who have not been in that particular situation, may not understand the dilemma that you brought about, like the worry that you could never be the flamenco dancer that you want to be. And for myself, like, it took me a very long while before I moved to the Netherlands to join my Dutch husband. I mean, we did long distance for 7 years before I could say, yeah, I will go to the Netherlands, because of the very same fear that I'm afraid that I will be letting go of my dreams. And for you and Mahmoud, like, how do you have that conversation between the both of you to decide that, okay, I'm going to Iran? How did that conversation go, or was it a series of conversation? Yeah.
Well, we didn't have so much that conversation because once again, even my husband did not know of my fear. And
Right.
uh, I would never recommend that this be the way people handle their conflicts with their cross-cultural partner.
Right.
I was just so very blessed that somehow everything worked out
Right.
well in our marriage and our romance. But but really, I would say I had to work it out on my own. My husband, I mean, I think he could sense that I had some anxieties, but he was not the best source to tell me about how life in Iran was because he had spent the last 12 years in the United States. So
Right.
it was completely different Iran. He was there before the revolution and
Right.
changed. And he went, it had always been his dream to go back to his country. So uh he had an idealism of just helping his people. And so that sounded noble to me. I just didn't know if it was for me. as far as what helped me, I won't say it was a motivation. So the motivation was love. It was just pure love for this very kind and good person. He was then and he still is now. Um, but what helped me hold on was again the same thing that I believed in first of all, I trusted him.
Right.
And second of all, I kind of held on to the same principles that I was teaching to other people, even though my head was a little messed up
Right.
here, but I held on to the belief that, you know, I will keep my open mind. I will reach out to this family. Mom would told me, you'll love my family. And I thought, well, in myself, I thought, well, we'll see.
Right.
But but when I reached out to them, when I reached out to the people there, they more than made up for uh, any fear that I had. They reached back 10 times more than I would reached out to them.
Right.
But it was just holding on to that belief and that little side of me that did want to see the world.
Yes.
Um, and so that's kind of how I worked it out. I realized the question for me wasn't so much, can I live in Iran, but
Right.
life be like without Mahmoud.
Yes.
I went. I went.
Yeah.
Did
That's
I
a
get
really
you?
bold move, and I completely understand it because it, uh, the worries and the fear at the end, it worked out and it's worth it. But it came with a lot of obstacles, right? That you have to overcome. And like paint the picture of how it is like for you as a Black American bride discovering Iran. And how was it like for you the first weeks and the first months? You were saying that the family really reached out to you. Were there any memories that jumped out to you?
Yeah. What was it like? It was it was honestly a beautiful reception when I went there. Um, I felt I felt encircled by my husband's family. That was the first community I came to know. The members of my husband's family. We stayed with them for a few months before we were established in our own home at the University of Isfahan in Iran. And so I had these few months to get to know my husband's family. Um, you mentioned or I mentioned the flamenco dancer that I was afraid I would not realize.
Mhm.
And of course, I'm talking metaphorically.
Yeah.
I never planned to really, or of course, I thought I would. But I'm just talking about the freedom of the joy, the color, the laughter, the humor. And there was plenty of that there was plenty of that when I was in Iran.
Mhm.
Um, and so much so that I feel like they taught me. I remember nights where we as a family would put on this joyful Iranian music and they would be dancing and they would tell me, come up and dance. And I thought, no, no, I don't know how to do this. And they pulled me up to my feet, and whether I wanted to or not, lo and behold, I was dancing, moving my hands, moving my arms in such a way that really kind of reminded me of flamenco dancing. And this cross fertilization of cultures, I think there's something to that. Um,
Right.
and so, you know, I would say also the amazing food of Iran.
Mm.
In my experience, most American people who try Iranian food are impressed and love it.
Right.
An art that's been perfected over thousands of years.
Right.
Persian culture. It's known in the Middle Eastern world as the place where you can get the best rice,
Right.
well cooked rice. So there was that, and there was also because back to what the purpose of my book was really to reveal my intercultural, my interracial, and my interfaith connection. Uh,
Right.
in Iran, and I felt very much accepted for who I was,
Right.
with an attempt to change who I
Yes.
was fundamentally. So actually, the flamenco dancer got kind of preserved because of them. Um, there's so much I could say, but I want to allow you to ask the
Yeah,
question.
of course. And I really like the fact that you mentioned that you were able to preserve a big part of yourself, the hidden, the inner flamenco dancer, despite the foreign environment for you there. And how long did you live in Iran?
It was about it was 4 years. It was
Wow.
1992 to 1996. We moved there 4 years after we were first married.
Yeah.
You wanted to say too, as far as the you know, the the aspect of the interfaith was also special to me.
Right.
When um, I was raised in the Christian tradition. And,
Yes.
um, later on in my life as a young woman, I made that rededication myself as a Christian. And so one of my dilemmas about marrying my husband was also about, is that okay? Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
I marry someone of a different faith? Will I be able to preserve my own identity in that? Will I be able to serve in that capacity? And um, will I be accepted in that capacity?
Right.
Uh, and so, uh, and of course, I really couldn't go to Iran and have a look-see trip like we
Of
often have,
course.
because since Mahmoud and I weren't married, there really wasn't a social outlet, a means for us to travel together as a single man and woman and be
Right.
accepted. So, so I had that question in my mind, and again, did not tell my husband about it. But after Mahmoud, he did, after 12 years, at least make one quick trip to Iran to visit his family, and he brought back a gift
Mm-hmm.
from who I call Maman and Baba,
Mm-hmm.
my
Your in-laws.
my in-laws. It was traditional to send a gift or have a gift for the bride of one's son, and it was to be a gift of gold. And when he came back and he said, "Here's a gift from Maman and Baba," he put it in my hand, and I opened my hand, and it was this
Oh,
it was this pendant. Um,
right.
and on it, in English, mind you,
Uh-huh.
scribed the word God, God.
Oh,
And that was my reaction too. My reaction was, "Oh, that's nice. What does that mean?" I wasn't sure, in the context of being given a gift by my Muslim parents
yeah.
to who had not met me, what that implied message was.
Right.
There are things attached to God that can be so beautiful, and things attached to God that can be so divisive.
Yes.
I wasn't sure how to interpret it because I didn't know. And so, this was going on in my mind, and um, I remember a conversation with Mahmoud telling him about my faith, and he listened, and he said, "Oh, you mean Jesus?" And
Mm-hmm.
he said, "Oh, well, we like him too. It's just that
Yes.
we don't like him quite as much as you guys do." And I thought that was such a profound, very funny, but very profound statement of
Yes.
acceptance. So I thought, well, this is the son of that person. I don't know. I took a closer look. The light fell on it in a different way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was inscribed the image of a cross.
Yes, indeed. This is
That spoke
very,
volumes to me. That spoke
yes.
volumes. It took my breath away. It told me. It was a model to me of what it means to accept
Yes.
and affirm someone in their own life faith journey.
Right.
It meant the world to me.
This is interesting to me because the idea that there is such openness within the Iranian culture, right? It almost it debunks the certain narrative of how this particular culture has been portrayed as being very closed. So was that very important for you?
Well, I would say that it was the blessing that I had experienced. I mean, it's been in I've lived long enough to find people from all faiths who can be very accepting
Right.
and accepting of someone else's faith tradition, as was the case with my father, my parents-in-law, my sisters-in-law, and brothers-in-law. And then
Right.
there are those who are not accepting and
Right.
have one way, one vision, and cannot engage in the same way in an interfaith relationship because of that. So I was just very blessed and fortunate to have someone to give that, to show that there are such beautiful people in Iran as there are in other parts of the world. And it was significant for me.
Yes. This goes on to the conversations that we had before, right? About certain portrayal in media and how the movie Not Without My Daughter that we had spoken about before. Tell me why this particular movie is significant for you as an intercultural trainer, author, speaker, as well as somebody who is in a cross-cultural, cross-faith marriage and had moved to Iran and back. Yeah.
Yes, Teratai. During this time, you mentioned that it took you 7 years to decide to marry your husband, and
Right.
I mean, you and I are. I feel like we're tight because we do understand. It's so complicated. You can be so much in love, but there's so many questions that one has regarding self and your potential partner.
Right.
And so it took me 4.5 years to decide. And while I was in that process of trying to decide back and forth, I love him, but do I marry him? I believe in him, but can I go to Iran and be authentically me? And at that very sensitive time when I was privately going through that back and forth, there was this book that was a bestseller circulating in the United States.
Right.
Some of your listeners will recognize the title, and it's the same title as the film you mentioned, and it preceded what inspired the movie, actually, Not Without My Daughter. It's the story of an American woman. She's about 10 years older than I am. She lived with her husband, an Iranian doctor, in the United States. They had one daughter. And after the revolution happened, he decided he wanted to take her for the first time and their little daughter, to Iran for a 2-week vacation. That was the premise. But according to the story, when they got there, he told them both that, guess what? We are not going back. You are here to stay. And she felt like a hostage in her own in her husband's family home. And it's a harrowing story of how she gets away. And so what I'm trying to say is that kind of thing, even though in my head I knew I knew that you just simply cannot judge a whole group of people one story.
Right, indeed.
That was my concern. I hadn't been there. I didn't see everything that happened, but it seemed the way that the story was told, there was so little that was redemptive of Iranian people or Iranian culture.
Mm-hmm.
And because of there's the Nigerian writer Chimamanda
Mm-hmm.
Ngozi Adichie. Um, she talks about the danger of a single story. So
Right.
this one story, because there were so few about a family and about in Iran, that single story was playing on the fears. It became the story that people referred to when they thought about Iran.
Mm.
Um, and that was the part that was painful to me, is that there was a danger that that could reinforce some of the negative stereotypes that already existed.
Yes.
And at the same time, I had to admit that somehow it even impacted me. There,
Of
my
course.
my aunt, when she first met Mahmoud, she was so charmed by him because
Right.
I felt like the real deal, and he treated people with kindness and humor and all of those lovely things. After she met him and told me how much she appreciated him, it was
Mm-hmm.
about 1 week later that I got a book. No, I'm sorry. I got a package. I'm sorry. I got a package in the mail from my aunt and niece. The same.
Mm.
I opened it up and it was the book, not with the.
Oh. Do you think they were aware about what the book was about at that
Of
point of
course.
time?
It
Oh,
was the same thing that you see they saw him. My aunt saw
yes.
him. She loved him, and yet that fear was playing in her because of the power of that story.
Indeed.
So, long story short, again, that was the motivation for me to write the book. I felt like I needed to present another story, another face
Yes.
that had so powerfully been a model of tolerance, of sublime uh, artistry, of dance, of music, of acceptance, of uh, just all of those things that we don't hear necessarily a lot of uh,
Indeed.
here in the West.
Right. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, we need to understand that it is a movie, it's a drama movie, and it's one story. But the impact of it is that it reached national consciousness of how a particular culture or country is being portrayed. And I think it's unfortunate, the portrayal of it all. And if you could today have a chance at editing that particular movie or making some changes to the movie, what would you have done today?
Probably there's not much I think I could do. I mean, I suppose I could write to the people who produce it and say, please, in the beginning, say that this is the
A
portrayal of,
portrayal, a disclaimer, right? Yeah.
yeah, something like that.
Yes.
But other than that, I suppose I did what I could do, which is to write this
Right.
side, this other story. Um, yeah, if I were asked to redo the story, I probably would be sick that day.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it is her story, right? And I think
Exactly.
the whole idea was that I think everybody have their own truths, right?
Yeah.
And for you, I imagine that this particular movie it strikes close to the heart because you are actually somebody who had moved to Iran and is married to an Iranian man. And
Yes.
it's a topic close to the heart. And if you could say something to set a record straight about the Iranian culture, what would that be?
Yes. It would be the story. I hope the story will speak for itself. There
Yes.
is a story in that story that I'd like to share, which
Yeah.
is one evening we were all together. The watering hole for our family was a village near, not far from the city Save, which wasn't too far from Tehran, but we would wander together in the village, and I don't know what I was doing, but somebody called out to me and said, Miss Leslie, come and join us. We're watching a movie. Have you heard of a film called Not Without My Daughter? Oh no.
Oh my.
What am I going to do when they see such a negative portrayal? You know, whether or not it's true was immaterial. It was just that it would be such a negative portrayal of this family,
Right.
this Iranian family, and most of the people who were in the film, not everyone, but most, I was so worried of their being offended. And they were all excited because they'd heard of this film. I didn't want to sit with them, okay?
Yeah.
And so I write about that. I write that throughout the whole film, I couldn't concentrate because I was so worried about people being hurt by that one. And at the end of the story, at the end of the film, the lights turned back on and I was ready.
Yes.
to answer their questions. But guess what? There was no question. They just said to each other, oh my goodness, that husband was such a jerk. Now that she got away.
Were you surprised by their reaction?
I was surprised, but I was also delighted. I was delighted that they had not seen this as something that was a story to inform all stories about Iranian.
Right.
It was one guy who was a jerk who treated this American woman, did her wrong, and they were glad she got away.
Yeah. And that's actually a really interesting angle to look at it, right? Because they don't see themselves being represented in the particular man, you know. But for you, it is important because we need to ensure the right narrative is being portrayed. Yeah, it's very interesting that it's so at odds. Like there's a cognitive dissonance to that perception. Yeah.
It really was. I mean, it was a tremendous relief. But in my heart, I knew that I just wanted to add to the stories of the people to people from Iran.
Indeed.
So that's the best way I know how to respond.
Right.
Stories. Yeah. Let them have their story, but let me also tell mine.
Indeed. That's very true. And being somebody who is in a cross-cultural, cross-faith marriage, and do you have any tips for somebody who say like they're about to move for love, like what we did, like what I'm doing right now? Do you have any tips for these people that are about to move on to a new adventure?
Yes, I do. I would say the most important thing is to know yourself and to know your own values. What things are the most dear and important to you? Which of those things, of your values as you identify them, which ones can you compromise on? Which ones are the non-negotiables?
Indeed.
And know the same thing about your prospective partner. It's better to look at those things straight on. Of course, it's easy for me to say I didn't do that really, at least not consciously.
Right.
You think on some level I understood that my husband and I had a lot of values in common, but it is challenging to identify one's own values. It's hard to have a discussion. We don't talk about that our values are so much a part of us, we may not even identify them as values.
Indeed.
We think it's the way things are.
Yeah.
It's not everything is not the way things are in all parts of the world or all the
Yeah.
cultures.
Yeah. What is normal to you may not be normal to others, right?
Exactly. So it's hard to even identify what the issues are, but you know, more and more people in the United States and in the world are marrying cross-culturally. And as a result, fortunately, there are some books out there that could be helpful in identifying what those questions are, things that you wouldn't necessarily think about, but as reflecting differences in cultural values. You know, how do
Indeed.
you value, how do you manage time? How much privacy do you need or not need?
Indeed.
How do men and women interact? What
Right.
are unspoken rules about that? There are books that can provide the questions based on, you know,
Yes.
in the intercultural world. And
Yeah.
it would be good to look through those things before you take that leap of faith that you and I did.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
um even on the internet there are books, but there are also tools on the internet if you look up intercultural love.
Indeed.
And I would also say that um it's not, this path can be wonderful, it can be beautiful. I think there are many of us who are maybe predisposed to the adventure and the sweetness and the excitement and the beauty of being in a different culture, learning a different culture, having a partner of a different culture. It can be delightful,
Right.
but it's not for everybody.
Indeed.
And and so again, these tools can help you determine
Yes.
if
Yeah.
if if you can, if you need to move, if you feel you can move forward, or if you feel you must say I love you, but perhaps this is not the best course for us to
Yeah.
go.
Listening from you speaking about your story, I would also want to think that having the humble attitude to wanting to receive new knowledge about other cultures and to remain and be curious of other people, so that you are open to learning what's different, right? Because again, I keep hearing it from all the stories that you shared today, that for a cross-cultural marriage to work, especially when one is moving abroad, you have to stay humble and be open to that, right?
Yes, you do. And attached to that, I think part of the humility involves having a sense of humor about you,
Yeah.
because no matter how at least in my experience, no matter how hard we try, at some point in time, there will be a misunderstanding,
Yes.
will be a complete misinterpretation of what's happening in this situation. And if you don't have a sense of humor, you're going to not be humbled, you'll be humiliated, when
Precisely.
it's not necessary, when it's not necessary. I can't tell you, but how many times, and it's in the book, that I said the wrong thing, did something outrageous, even while I was trying and thinking I was doing the right thing.
Right.
Uh, and fortunately, my spouse and my husband's family also had a sense of humor, and we had a lot of laughter about it. I think
Yeah.
it's important for them to know, however, that I was open and that I was trying, and that's something that is sensed. And so
Yeah.
I agree with you, Teratai, about being open and humble.
And having a sense of humor will help. Now,
Yeah.
Leslie, this is amazing. I really love chatting with you all the time. Every time I speak to you, there's always like little light bulbs that goes off, like it keeps getting deeper and deeper. And I know we have a love for the written language. So usually I end off with, so would you like to say anything to your friends and families around the world? But I also know that you have a special something to say, to share. Would you like to do that?
Yes. There are two things I'd like to share today. One is a quotation from one of our nieces in Iran. She's still there. She's about 32 years old. I interviewed her in my own blog, which you can see at leslieahmadi.com. But I asked her to share something that was important to her. This was, maybe a year and a half ago. But there is a Persian poet by the name of Sadi. He is from the 13th century, but his poetry, known for its wisdom, its awareness, its social value, has remained for centuries. Sadi, by the way, is spelled Saadi, one of Iran's most famous poets. And she wanted to share this, and I thought, I saw some very polished translations, but I liked hers the best, the way she read it first in Persian. I won't do that for you today. But her translation was just real and heartfelt. So I'd like to read that.
Yes, please.
It says, and I say this to my friends, your friends on this broadcast, all people are from the same body, and all of us are human. And if somebody suffers in other side, we will suffer. And if somebody, and then my niece adds, in America, in Africa, in Australia, or in Europe, and everywhere, suffers and hungry and sad, we are sad. And we suffer. So all of us are from a common body.
I really like it.
Please have one more quotation I'd like to leave you with.
Of course.
One of my favorites for the length of, of the length of my life as a cross-cultural trainer. And also, now it's just part of what I think of as embracing me just as a person, this saying. The book that I've written really is about my interfaith, my intercultural, my interracial journey. But the theme that I think is captured in this quotation by the French writer Marcel Proust is the following. Whoops, it just slipped from my head.
No worries.
Yes, my journey to Iran was a voyage of sorts, right? It was a trip, it was a voyage.
Yes.
And my husband says the real voyage of discovery lies not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. And so the value of that for me is that going to Iran, and after 4 years coming back, I had a whole new set of eyes of seeing the people and the culture of Iran. And that has been a gift.
Oh, how nice is that? I think that's really beautiful. It's a beautiful encapsulation of your journey to and fro Iran. And thank you so much, Leslie, for today. I really learned a lot from you. And Leslie's details are below. And thank you for being part of this podcast series, Leslie. And for all of us who are tuning in, thank you for watching. And see you the next time. Bye.